Hello there, and welcome back to this episode of Dr. Robotnik's Ring Races. In this episode, I took on the Grow Cup. Some crazy stuff happened over the course of this Grand Prix, so let's give the introductions and get straight into the action on Chaos Suit. This is based on the special stages from Sonic 2, as you can clearly see, and isn't that complex of a course as a result. Simple layout over 3 laps, with the only dangers being the other races and the few mines that are dotted about. My advice would be to forego holding onto items in favour of constantly using your ring boosts, because there are so many rings lying around in massive groups that there's very little chance of running low on them for long. I got into first, near immediately doing that, and despite a few hiccups at the 2/3 mark, it was an easy victory with a full pocket of rings. While Chaos Suit was very clearly a Sonic 2 special stage transplanted into a racing game, Dimension Disaster seems to be more based on the vibe of Sonic CD and its special stages, with UFOs floating around and aesthetics based on the game's graphic materials, like these overly complicated directional signs and the moody dark blue and purple colour palette. That said, I didn't have much time to take all of that in because I had to focus on winning a race. Dimension Disaster is a pretty narrow course for how tight some of its corners can be, especially with how many of the most important corners are lined by sword walls, and handling is not one of Mechasonic's strong suits, so the first 2 laps were spent awkwardly shambling around trying to keep up with the lead. It wasn't until an uncharacteristically persistent Jaws narrowed the gap between me and first that I was able to take advantage of Mechasonic's strengths, and good use of some ring boosts allowed me to take some very straight racing lines and ultimately come out on top. I even managed to fit in a final fastball to replenish some rings and ensure my ring bonus was as strong as possible. I'm assuming Dead Simple is a port of a Doom map, considering the Cacodemons released from each prison, but I could well be wrong. The round started off well, as I took out most of the prisons in the main courtyard of the complex with relative ease. I then got absolutely demolished by one of the SPBs that prowl the outer perimeter, and bounced around for just long enough to be comedic, but I brought it back, and ultimately completed the round with a fantastic trick shot that was absolutely, completely, 100% intentional.
Blow you away! Die! you away! Is that your best?
Aurora Atoll is a course I've grown somewhat familiar with in SRB 2K, seeing as I've spent a lot of time with that game in recent months. But I think that familiarity was actually a problem when encountering it Ring Races Incarnation. Outside of the name and baseline concept as a beachside track at sunset, the two have almost nothing in common, and in expecting a more recognizable track layout, I floundered in my first lap and much of the second. This section with the water rapids was particularly disorienting. I ultimately pulled it together in the latter half, and after taking out my rival with a landmine to the dome, I ultimately won the race. It was only after I crossed the line that I realized how narrowly I had won, but a win it was nonetheless. Compared to Aurora Atoll, Daytona Speedwave remains almost 1-to-1 with how it played in SRB2K. Probably because Kart Crew realised they'd have been crucified if they had changed such an iconic course. Although, the edit of the iconic Daytona theme it doesn't hit the same, you know? The singer sounds like he forgets his lines 20 seconds in, and it just doesn't stack up to the legendary original. Won by a landslide though, because a course full of generous corners and long straights is the perfect place for a super heavyweight like Mechasonic to shine. When I first loaded into Master Matrix, I was immediately so disoriented that I fully believed that this would be another catastrophically poor Prison Break performance. Luckily, that was an extremely pessimistic outlook. Outside of the translucent top floor, the arena's design is actually pretty simple, and I finished the whole thing in about 40 seconds.
Is that your best?
Turquoise Hill was maybe the worst possible track to finish what was up to that point an extremely successful cut, because I don't think there could be a worse track to be playing as Mechasonic on. As I've repeated multiple times throughout this episode, Mechasonic does not have particularly good handling, and so corners, especially sharp ones, are no fun as him. He excels in breaking away during long straights, where his incredible top speed and powerful ring boosts allow him to mercilessly chase down and pass racers ahead of him. The only problem is that Turquoise Hill doesn't really have any straights, only corners. The only time the course has any extended straight line movement comes after two 180 turns in a row, and it's littered with dash panels, so it's not like I'm able to outrun anybody on it where my low acceleration is accounted for. The rest of the time is spent scraping up against fences and grinding to a halt to make corners, and so for 2 attempts in a row, I was faced with the same ending. A big flashing 5, and Egg Robo staring at me from the goalpost. For the sake of brevity, I've cut those 2 attempts out and left you with the one where I win by a landslide with a ton of rings. ignoring those final pitfalls, that was a very strong performance I had throughout the Cup. So it was no surprise when I entered the Sealed Star. I've done a few of these off screen while I was completing challenges, so this is actually Fountain, the final Sealed Star with a Chaos Emerald contained within. And, well, I think I'm just gonna let this one play out. That's the second S rank I've gone so far, and definitely the most stylish finish to a Cup I've yet had. I wish there was a way to know how close to failing that attempt I was, because it must have been mere frames before the Emerald would have reached the finish line. Anyway, I finally found out what your reward is for collecting all 7 Chaos Emeralds, and it's sadly not supersonic or anything like that. It's a Chaos Emerald as a follower, as well as the ability to play the sealed stars you've entered without needing to go through a whole cup beforehand. A fine reward could be better, although the fact that there are several empty monitors left on that screen tells me that there are still more emeralds to collect, so fingers crossed for a reward for those. I set the Chaos Emerald as my follower for bragging rights, but with my achievement now plain to see every time I enter an online lobby, I think it's time to wrap things up. The next episode will be me taking on the Chow Cup, but for now, I hope you enjoyed the video. Ciao.